Morning, everyone. We called this press conference today primarily to talk about the climate and particularly the climate accountability legislation that we assume the government is going to be at least signaling their intention this week to introduce. But before I do that, I want to take a moment just to speak about our other great threat, the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen numbers spiking all across the country. We are in a second wave that shows no indication of cresting anytime soon. We have been told that we're at risk of many more thousands of lives being lost. And I say that this is the moment for leadership. I was reflecting this morning that you don't have many times in your life when you realize that you're living through history. There is no doubt that this is one of those historical moments, and the choices that we make now are choices we are going to have to live with for a long time. They're choices that are going to be defining of the political leadership that we have in our country. And so I say very clearly that we must accept that this is not a local health issue. This is not a provincial health issue. This is a national health emergency. It is a national pandemic. And a national emergency demands a national solution. And so in terms of that, what we need to be aware of is that we need our federal government and we need our Prime Minister to step up and show the kind of leadership that you require in a national emergency. And this is one of the ways that I speak, not only as a leader of a party, but also as a citizen. I am also a mother, I'm also a daughter, I'm also a sister. And as a mother, I have a son who is not in school because of this pandemic right now. As a sister, I have a brother who was working in the oil patch and he's lost his job, and that job is not coming back. And as a daughter, I'm the daughter of a father who died in long-term care during this pandemic because of the kind of neglect that we have seen all across this country. And so I'm not only speaking as a leader, I'm speaking as a citizen. And I'm telling our Prime Minister that what he needs to do is to convene an intergovernmental COVID task force of the scientists so that we can be guided by the science, so that we can have clear messaging, so that we can have a unified, coordinated national response. And I remind him that, this is what we have seen and expected from the United States. The reason that Biden won, or certainly one of the reasons that President-elect Biden won, was exactly because he promised to convene a COVID task force, and that's the very first thing that he did when he did win. I refuse to believe that Canada is any less capable than any other country who has more successfully tackled the COVID pandemic to come together to create a national response. I have confidence that we can do this, and I know that it's what the people of Canada demand. Alors en français, juste pour dire que nous sommes en ce moment dans une pandémie. Ce n'est pas une crise régionale, ce n'est pas une crise de santé provinciale, c'est vraiment une crise nationale. Nous sommes en train de faire face à une crise qui est peut-être la plus grande crise de notre époque, surtout la plus grande crise à part de la crise climatique hors de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Et une crise nationale requiert une solution nationale aussi. Les gens au Canada le réclament et dans mon cas, je le réclame aussi en tant que citoyen. Je suis mère avec un fils qui n'est pas dans l'école en ce moment à cause du pandémie. Je suis une sœur avec un frère qui ne travaille pas en ce moment en Alberta parce que son travail dans le secteur pétrolier n'existe plus. Et je suis Je suis la fille d'un père qui est mort à cause de la pandémie dans un centre de soins de longue durée. Et en ce moment, on voit qu'il y a encore des gens chaque jour qui meurent dans les centres de soins de longue durée. Alors, moi, je dis en tant que citoyen, même plus que chef d'un parti fédéral, que c'est le moment de demander à notre Premier ministre de démontrer leadership et de créer un comité des scientifiques pour créer des messages clairs, pour créer un système coordonné de réponse à la pandémie. Je refuse d'accepter que ce n'est pas possible. Je refuse d'accepter que nous sommes moins capables ici au Canada de protéger les gens que dans les autres pays. Et je prends note que la première chose que le président élu aux États-Unis a fait dès qu'il a gagné l'élection, c'était de créer son COVID Task Force. Alors, c'est le moment de démontrer leadership, c'est un moment historique. Et j'espère que notre Premier ministre et aussi nos premiers ministres dans les provinces vont faire ce qui est nécessaire pour protéger les gens ici au Canada. Turning to the climate, which is our other big threat that we are facing. First, and it seems self-evident to say this, but it's important to note that we cannot forget the climate emergency because the climate emergency has not forgotten us. The planet has not stopped warming during the pandemic, and we are heading headlong into a climate tipping point, and we need to pull back from that brink. And the great news, and this is really the great news, and this is why we should not at all be concerned about what we can do. The great news is that we have all that we need in order to reach our climate goals, and that reaching our climate goals is actually going to be the quickest way for us to recover from this pandemic. Now, this is something that creates the prosperity of the future, it creates the jobs of the future, and it's something that major economies around the world, whether it is the European Union, the United Kingdom, and now the United States, have recognized that a green recovery is the single most impactful way for us to repair the economic damage caused by the pandemic. It's the greatest economic opportunity of our lifetime, and it's one that we want to make sure that Canada seizes. And so the Green Party, we've been calling for this for a long time. We've been prepared for this for a long time, and we know that this is the moment to finally begin this transformation. We're calling for a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 levels by 2030. We want to see a carbon budget, which lets us know how much greenhouse gases we are permitted to expend over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years in order to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. We're calling for a carbon adjustment, a carbon border adjustment, and we now have a partner in the President-elect of the United States in creating one. This protects businesses in Canada, and it also helps us to incentivize other countries to put in place their own strong targets. We want to see tremendous investment in renewable energies and clean tech. And let me underline that clean tech is expected to be a $3 trillion a year sector by the year 2030, $3 trillion a year, and Canada can be a part of that. We need to see deep energy retrofits of all of our buildings. We want to see incremental increases in our carbon tax annually, and we want to see the creation of a national electricity corridor. Now, the hundreds of billions of dollars that we are going to be spending on economic stimulus once we enter into the recovery phase from the pandemic and we have an effective treatment, it's clear that the best use of that money is in putting in place this green recovery. These are the crucial elements that we expect to see in the Liberal climate legislation, climate accountability legislation. And I would say that it remains to be seen whether the Liberals are ready to seize this chance of a lifetime. We've had 5 years of missed opportunities, of broken promises, of weak targets, and that time is over. The train is leaving the station, and we are either going to be a country that leads or we are going to be a country that follows. Et finalement, en français, Alors, nous sommes encore dans une crise climatique. C'est l'autre grande menace de notre époque, là, avec la pandémie. La bonne nouvelle, c'est que nous avons tout ce qu'il faut pour créer un plan pour atteindre nos objectifs climatiques dans le plus rapide manière possible et aussi de réparer les dommages causés par la pandémie et fortifier notre économie. Les grandes économies au monde, ils ont déjà mis en place leurs projets pour relancer leurs économies dans une manière verte parce qu'ils reconnaissent que c'est ça la plus grande opportunité économique de notre vie. Alors, le Parti vert, dans la législation qui va être proposée par le Parti libéral, on cherche plusieurs aspects. On veut voir une réduction de 60% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre par rapport au niveau de 2005, un budget carbone. On veut voir un rajustement frontalier du carbone, des investissements dans les énergies renouvelables et le Cleantech, et ça devrait générer 3 000 milliards de dollars d'ici 2030. Nous voulons voir des améliorations d'efficacité énergétique des bâtiments, une augmentation dans la taxe carbone par tranche annuelle et un corridor électrique national permettant à 100% d'énergie renouvelable de traverser les frontières provinciales. Alors, ça, c'est le formulaire pour créer l'économie du futur. C'est l'économie de nous aider à sortir de la pandémie. Et ça reste à voir si le gouvernement libéral a le leadership qu'il faut pour le faire. Parce que ça fait 5 années de promesses brisées, d'actions inadéquates. Et le Canada risque de devenir de moins en moins compétitif à l'échelle internationale. Je veux rassurer les gens que, quoi qu'il soit, le Parti vert est là. Nous avons un plan. Nous sommes prêts à faire ce qu'il faut pour profiter au maximum de cette opportunité. Nous allons regarder pour voir si la législation est à la hauteur de ce moment historique. Merci.
We'll start with the question period. Nous allons maintenant commencer la période des questions. As usual, 1 question, 1 follow-up. We'll start with 3 questions on the phone before turning to the room. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. Nous allons commencer avec 3 questions au téléphone avant d'en prendre dans la salle. Please identify yourself before asking your question. S'il vous plaît, identifiez-vous avant de poser votre question. OK, on commence avec le téléphone, s'il vous plaît.
Sorry, just to mention, sorry, I didn't see Paul. Paul, hello down there. You don't come up as big on the screen, but good to see you.
Thank you, merci. Please press *1 if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. La première question de Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. La parole est à vous.
Bonjour, Mme Paul. Comment allez-vous?
Très bien, merci. Et vous?
Très bien, merci. Est-ce que, quand vient le temps pour le régime de pension du Canada, par exemple, d'investir dans certaines entreprises, dans votre plan sur le climat et sur la carboneutralité, est-ce que vous croyez que le gouvernement devrait diriger le régime de pension du Canada de cesser d'investir dans les compagnies qui sont dans les énergies fossiles?
Bon, les investissements, on voit de plus en plus les grands fonds, les grands actionnaires commencer à investir dans les investissements fossiles, dans le secteur fossile. Et ça, c'est parce que, et c'est juste un fait, que c'est un secteur qui est en déclin, c'est un secteur qui est en train de vivre ces dernières années. Et l'argent, les bons investissements, les investissements du futur, c'est clair qu'ils sont dans les énergies renouvelables, dans le secteur de Cleantech. Comme je dis, c'est un secteur qui est en train d'augmenter chaque année par des centaines de milliards de dollars. Et oui, ce n'est pas compatible avec notre un plan national d'atteindre nos cibles pour combattre la crise climatique et de atteindre nos cibles, de réduire les gaz à effet de serre, de continuer à investir dans un secteur où c'est le plus grand contributeur de gaz à effet de serre au Canada.
Donc, quand on se retrouve dans une situation où le régime de pension du Canada investit dans de l'énergie fossile et dans une compagnie qui fait concurrence à Hydro-Québec, qui, elle, veut développer l'énergie verte en Nouvelle-Angleterre, vous trouvez cette situation-là comment?
Oui, je viens juste de lire le résumé sur Radio-Canada sur cette situation. J'aimerais voir une compagnie qui fonctionne d'une manière verte et qui propose un réseau d'énergie verte, que ce soit en compétition avec des entreprises qui utilisent les fossiles et qui fonctionnent dans le secteur fossile. Alors, je n'ai pas tous les détails sur cette situation, mais absolument, c'est clair que notre gouvernement, je sais aussi que notre pension, ce n'est pas directement dirigé par notre gouvernement, mais il faut dire que absolument, c'est le moment de notre pension, notre système de pension, de faire ce que les autres grandes pensions un peu partout au monde sont en train de faire, et c'est de désinvestir dans le secteur pétrolier et d'investir dans les secteurs verts et dans les énergies renouvelables et dans le Cleantech.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question. Next question, please, operator.
Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir, la parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour Madame Paul. J'aimerais revenir à la COVID. Vous nous avez dit tout à l'heure que vous aimeriez voir une approche pan-canadienne. Est-ce que dans votre tête à vous, ça doit aller jusqu'à l'invocation de la loi sur les mesures d'urgence qui permettrait donc à Ottawa de dicter certains comportements ou certaines règles aux provinces?
Ça ne devrait pas être nécessaire. Je ne comprends pas pourquoi ce serait nécessaire. Parce que les gens au Canada sont la responsabilité de chaque niveau de gouvernement. Et les gens au Canada méritent d'être protégés. Et si nos politiciens, à chaque niveau de gouvernement, tiennent en tête que leur responsabilité, c'est de protéger les gens et de s'occuper de leurs besoins urgents dans cette pandémie, ils allont faire ce qui est nécessaire, et c'est de se rassembler pour considérer comment nous pouvons créer un plan coordonné pour protéger les gens. Ce qui se passe maintenant ne fonctionne pas. Ça, c'est clair. Les gens sont en train de mourir. Nous avons une deuxième vague et on ne voit pas des améliorations. Alors, j'ai la confiance dans nos politiciens, soit au niveau provincial, municipal et fédéral, de faire ce qui est nécessaire pour protéger les gens. Et c'est clair que ça nécessite une approche coordonnée, une approche nationale. Il faut qu'ils parlent avec une voix.
Mais je fais un suivi là-dessus. En quoi est-ce que c'est important de tenir le même discours partout au pays, dans la mesure où la situation varie énormément d'un endroit à l'autre, même dans une même province, où vous avez des régions où il y a très peu de cas et c'est peut-être pas nécessaire de fermer les bars, alors que dans d'autres régions, comme Montréal ou Toronto, il faut fermer les restaurants. Pourquoi voulez-vous à ce point avoir une approche, permettez-moi l'expression, one size fits all?
Parce que, bon, c'est possible d'avoir un système de codification, par exemple, qui reconnaît qu'il y a des différences de sévérité dans la pandémie partout au pays. C'est pas nécessaire d'avoir une approche pour chaque région, pour chaque ville, mais il faut avoir un système de codification qui est national. Il faut avoir des messages qui sont coordonnés. Et je vais peut-être donner un exemple pour souligner ce point. Comme vous peut-être, comme tout le monde sache, j'étais une candidate dans l'élection partielle à Toronto en octobre. Il y avait le message des officiels de santé dans la ville de Toronto était de rester chez nous, de ne pas sortir si ce n'était pas absolument essentiel de sortir de la maison. Ça, c'était leur message. Il y avait un autre message du gouvernement provincial. Et puis, notre gouvernement fédéral a dit que oui, c'est absolument sécuritaire. Il n'y a pas de problème de sortir de la maison pour aller voter, pour aller rester dans les longues queues pour voter. Alors ça, c'est un exemple de 3 messages différents, 3 messages mixtes. Et en ce moment, les gens, ils sont préparés à faire ce qui est nécessaire, mais ils ont besoin d'avoir des messages clairs, des messages coordonnés et de voir nos politiciens parler avec une voix unifiée. Oh, yes. So I was saying that, we don't need to have a one-size-fits-all approach in order to have a nationally coordinated strategy. That's clear. We can have a coding system that applies across the country, but that recognizes that some people might be in a green zone while other people might be in a yellow zone and others might be in a red zone. The problem right now is that we have very mixed and confusing messages at a time where people in Canada have said, we are willing to do what is necessary. We are going to prioritize life. And we are going to do what it takes to protect the most vulnerable people in our communities. But you need to help us know what to do. And that is the help that they are not receiving right now because we do not have a coordinated, unified messaging on the pandemic. And the example that I'll give, some of you will remember I was a candidate in the Toronto Centre by-election last month. And during that by-election, we had the local health authorities telling us to stay home. Do not leave unless it is absolutely essential. Do not have any contact with anyone outside of your immediate household. And then you had the province that left some businesses open and did not echo the messaging that the Toronto health authorities were giving. And then finally, you had a federal government that was saying it was entirely safe and entirely acceptable to have people lining up on election day and in advance voting to go and vote. And that it was possible to do it under safe conditions. And so it's that kind of mixed messaging that is leading to these spikes that we have seen, that's leading to no end to the second wave. And so what people in Canada deserve and what we need is a unified, coordinated messaging and response to what is a national pandemic and a national crisis.
Thank you. One more question from the telephone. Merci. Encore question du téléphone.
Prochaine question est de Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour Madame Paul. Je voudrais savoir, donc les libéraux ont l'intention de déposer un projet de loi plus tard cette semaine là, sur la carboneutralité d'ici 2050. Est-ce que c'est une bonne étape selon vous, ce projet de loi-là?
Sur le projet de loi sur
la carboneutralité, donc net zero emissions by 2050.
Ah oui, pardon, oui. Oui, bon, ça reste à voir. Comme je viens de dire, il faut voir les détails parce que ça fait 5 années de promesses brisées, 5 années de cibles faibles. Et même avec des cibles faibles, nous n'avons pas réussi à atteindre nos cibles et nous ne sommes pas en train de les atteindre. Et il ne vaut pas la peine d'avoir une cible pour 2050 si nous n'avons pas une budget de carbone, si nous n'avons pas identifié des étapes à franchir pour atteindre nos émissions zéro d'ici 2050. Moi, je ne serai pas en politique en 2050, ni notre Premier ministre, d'ailleurs, je ne crois pas. Alors, d'avoir une cible pour 2050 où il n'a absolument aucune comptabilité, ce n'est pas une vraie cible. Et c'est juste une manière de passer la responsabilité à notre génération, à des autres politiciens. Alors, nous avons tout ce qu'il faut pour créer un plan que nous pouvons implémenter dès ici, dès le moment où nous avons un traitement pour le virus. C'est le moment de planifier. C'est le moment de mettre en place toutes les mesures nécessaires. Et comme j'avais dit, c'est aussi l'opportunité de vraiment réanimer et relancer notre économie. C'est la plus grande opportunité économique de notre génération.
Et donc, mais juste pour revenir à ce projet de loi, qu'est-ce qui est important qu'on trouve à l'intérieur de cette loi-là, selon vous? Est-ce que c'est qu'il y ait, par exemple, un mécanisme de, je sais pas, de punition là, si jamais les cibles ne sont pas respectées? Qu'est-ce que vous voudriez voir précisément dans ce projet de loi-là?
Oui, absolument. Il faut avoir des mécanismes pour suivre l'implémentation. Il faut avoir des conséquences si les cibles ne sont pas respectées. Il faut avoir, comme je dis, il faut avoir un budget de carbone parce que si nous n'avons pas un numéro de base pour évaluer notre performance, ça ne vaut pas la peine. Et je veux aussi souligner que 2020, c'était l'année pour le Canada d'augmenter leur contribution nationale déterminée pour réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Nous ne l'avons pas fait. Notre cible reste encore 30%, qui est à peu près 50% de moins de ce qui est nécessaire. Et il faut aussi noter que nous sommes maintenant en arrière de toute l'Union européenne, de le Royaume-Uni et bientôt en arrière des États-Unis. Et malheureusement, il y a beaucoup de gens qui croient ici au Canada que notre performance est meilleure que les Américains, mais ce n'est pas le cas. Les Canadiens et le Canada consomment et est responsable pour plus de gaz à effet de serre par personne que les États-Unis. Alors, nous sommes en train de perdre la compétition globale pour l'économie verte et pour les secteurs verts. Et nous sommes aussi en train de ne pas atteindre nos cibles, même les cibles faibles. Alors, c'est ça que nous attendons en tant que Parti vert. Et si le Parti libéral n'est pas capable de le faire, si ils ont décidé qu'ils ont des autres priorités à part de protéger notre planète et lutter contre la crise climatique, je veux rassurer les gens que le Parti vert est ici. Nous avons un plan. Nous sommes tout à fait prêts d'assumer cette responsabilité.
Thank you. We're going to turn to the room now. Any questions in the room? Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la chambre?
Hi, Ms. Paul. Mackenzie Gray with CTV News.
Hi.
I'd just like to judge what your confidence level is or how important you think it is at this point in time for you to get into Parliament. I know it's a minority and that it could fall at any point, so I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And in the same vein, a question for Ms. May. Ms. May, you were very critical of Jagmeet Singh for running a NDP candidate in Toronto Centre when Ms. Paul was running previously, claiming leader's courtesy. Previously, leader's courtesy meant that someone from the party at which a leader was looking to run for resigned. Elmer MacKay resigned to have Brian Mulroney run in his seat back when Mr. Mulroney was the new leader of the Conservative Party. Are you considering doing the same thing if Ms. Paul feels it's necessary for her to be in Parliament?
Thank you for the question. You know, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know how long this parliament is going to last. It seemed to be stable, and now it seems to be quite fragile. We're seeing a lot of pre-election posturing by the parties. We're seeing considerations creep in that don't have anything to do with tackling this pandemic, for instance. And all that suggests to me that some of the other political parties are trying to get their ducks in a row to go to an election sooner rather than later. I certainly hope that that is not the case. I just outlined two reasons why we shouldn't be doing that. We are in the midst of a pandemic where we have no credible strategy and where people are dying today because we have no credible strategy. What people in Canada expect and what they've demanded and they expect and they deserve is a cross-party cooperation that is going to ensure that lives are protected. I haven't been using the World War II analogies, but we are on a crisis footing here. You don't go into an election when you're dealing with a mortal danger. And what the pandemic represents is a mortal danger. So if we go to the election soon, then I will be running somewhere. And if we go later on, then I will be running somewhere as well. I know that there's a lot that I can do within Parliament, but I also know that the messaging that I'm trying to get to Canadians, which is that Greens have a plan for the pandemic, Greens have a plan for the climate, Greens have a plan to close the holes in our social safety net, I can carry that message within Parliament or without. So either way, I'm confident I can be effective. And I'll turn it to Elizabeth for her answer.
Yeah, I'll try to be very brief. I will, since I have since je prends la parole pour un moment, je peux dire seulement sur les autres questions de la suggestion de mon chef sur une approche plus coordonnée entre les niveaux de gouvernement. I just wanted to turn media's attention as well to Australia. Australia did very well in fighting the pandemic, and as Annamie has said so clearly, where you see coordination, you don't need to have one size fits all, and certainly all of this, it's a federated state like Canada. The state level medical health officers in Australia formed a committee, worked together, as did their health ministers. That's exactly what we're calling for today, just to give people a concrete example, and you can see that Australia had better results than we're having so far. As to the other question, the only reason Leader's courtesy came up was that Jagmeet Singh was unlikely to have won the seat in Burnaby South in the 2019 by-election. We stepped back to help to assist. We didn't arrive at any reciprocal promises from the NDP on that occasion, but it certainly was a perfect occasion for them to reciprocate in Toronto Centre. And just to be clear, Annamie Paul never asked for them to reciprocate. That was a comment that I made. As for right now, and I think Annamie said it best, the Greens aren't interested in substituting seats. We're interested in growing more seats for Greens to occupy in Parliament. And where we're at right now, we almost were in an election what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago on the so-called anti-corruption committee vote. Given the timing around by-elections, even if I were persuaded or if I was asked, I haven't been asked, Annamie's been pretty clear she isn't going to ask me, but given where we are in this Parliament, it's not at all clear that we'd even have a by-election called before the next general election. So I just remind people that I've said before that what I see as my goal in succession planning around leadership of the Green Party was to do what happens very rarely in Canadian politics, which is a supportive and positive role for an outgoing leader to support an incoming leader. The last time I saw it done well was Alexa McDonough in support of Jack Layton. And I remind media, Jack Layton never won a seat in Parliament between when he became leader of the NDP and when he took that party into their general election. So there's a lot of options here, but on the facts, there isn't a path that suggests there's any reason for me to step down in Saanich Gulf Islands. It hasn't been suggested. It hasn't been requested. And given the timing of where we sit now in this Parliament and looking, I think, at the likelihood of a spring election, it wouldn't make any sense. But I certainly thought Annamie put it best. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, Greens are looking to grow seats. We're not looking to cannibalize seats. And given that we have, at this moment, a government that has no credible plan and has demonstrated that they're not willing to step up to the next phase of leadership in tackling the pandemic. And given that we still have no credible plan on the climate emergency, you know, I'm asking people in Canada to look again at the Green Party because we do. And you match a party to the moment, and I believe very strongly that the Green Party is best matched to the moment that we find ourselves in as a country.
During the debate over CERB, late in the morning or early in the morning, I remember Ms. May stood up and said that her position was that she supported the implementation of the Emergencies Act because she felt it was necessary at this time to have the federal government have the necessary powers to apply various regulations over the provinces. You mentioned here that it's a piecemeal approach, that we need to have a coordinated strategy. As the new leader of the party, is it your position that the Emergencies Act should be implemented?
My position is that if politicians at the federal level, the provincial level, and the municipal level have the interests of people in Canada at mind, there is absolutely no need to invoke the Emergencies Act. This is simply asking politicians in Canada to do what we have done at other moments of great need, and great crisis in Canadian history, which is to come together and to have a coordinated approach and to speak with a unified voice. Based on the way that we're approaching this situation, we would never have had the Canada Health Act. We could never imagine having a national childcare strategy or a national housing strategy. These things also are not areas of federal jurisdiction. And yet, when we put people first, we were able to come together to make those things possible. And I refuse to believe that this generation of politicians and of Canadians is any less capable of taking care of itself and future generations than previous ones. And so I don't see any reason that we should arrive at that point. We're asking for a simple thing, which is to do what the United States has announced they have already done. The first thing Joe Biden did when he became the president-elect was to convene a COVID task force of doctors. They're all doctors. They're going to be led by the science, and they're going to have a national coordinated response. We need the same thing. We need a response that is led by the science and that is coordinated and unified. And we can do that without invoking any Emergencies Act or anything as extreme as that. I have confidence that that's possible.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in to make sure that people don't think there's a difference of opinion between Annamie Paul and myself? Paul Manley as well, when we were in the House in the spring, it was a different time in terms of how Canada was responding to COVID. We had really poor coordination of information gathering. We were some provinces were sending information to Health Canada by fax. Health Canada couldn't tell us the infection rate because of the lack of coordination. And I was very drawn to when I read the public health emergency section of the Emergencies Act, I'm like, okay, this could work. We're in a different time now. Our data collection is far better coordinated than it was in the spring. We've made a lot of strides, and that's why the Green Party's suggestion now is not the Emergencies Act, but a coordination, again, looking around the world, looking at what Australia was doing. And I've consulted, and the Greens have consulted, a lot of public health experts in coming to the conclusion that what we need is a coordinated approach that brings our public health officers around the same table, brings our health ministers around the same table, and has a coordinated national approach. You don't need the Emergencies Act for that. I mean, it does remain there, in emergency, break glass, pull lever. But we're not there now, and we're in a different position than we were in the spring when I made those comments in the CERB debate.
Hi, Madam Paul. Hi, everyone.
Hi, David.
What role does nuclear play in what you're proposing today?
It does not. We've been very clear that nuclear energy is a non-starter at this point. It is too costly to build. The cost overruns related with virtually every nuclear project that we've ever done in this country are significant. It takes too long. We're dealing with a very short time delay in order to tackle the climate emergency and significantly reduce our greenhouse gases. It takes a very long time to build nuclear facilities, even small modular reactors. And we still have no effective way of dealing with the nuclear waste that is generated through the production of nuclear energy. Are there advancements being made? Absolutely. Is technology moving along? Absolutely. But at the moment, and when compared to the other options that we have to get us to net zero, nuclear energy is just simply not on the table for us.
Follow up?
Yeah, there's a follow-up with that.
Yeah, sure.
The Liberals, of course, disagree with you. They're aggressively pushing and talking about small modular nuclear reactors. And when you look at Cleantech, it isn't without its own environmental footprint. So how do you expect to balance that? How do you expect to resolve those issues that even Cleantech has?
Well, again, in the case of nuclear energy, the government is just plain wrong on this. This is not the road for us to be heading down. We are significantly underinvesting in clean tech. We're significantly underinvesting in renewable energies. All of those have more promise to get us to net zero in the time that we have left. And so, again, for us, it is simply a non-starter. They're just wrong. The science and the economics do not support the case that they're making at this moment for nuclear energy. And so for us, it is not a balancing act. In terms of Cleantech is a very, it's a catch-all for many types of technology, some which are more advanced than others, some which show more promise than others. But this is an area where Canada has already, despite the underinvestment by our government, has already demonstrated tremendous potential, and where a number of the leading clean tech companies are based here in Canada. And so if we're looking for somewhere to invest where we can get to net zero, we can build the jobs of the future and build the economy of the future, clean technology has got to be part of that mix. And we should be using the hundreds of billions of dollars that we'll be spending, a part of it, to make sure that we are a global leader in clean technology. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Est-ce qu'il y a encore des questions sur le téléphone? Are there any more questions on the telephone?
We have one more question from Alex Ballingal from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hey, thanks very much for taking my question. I jumped on the call a little late, so thank you very much. Just following up on something you said, Ms. Paul, about consequences in the climate accountability legislation. If Canada doesn't hit the targets, I guess, set in that legislation, there should be consequences. What does that mean? How would that work? What are the consequences?
That's an excellent question. And again, this isn't necessarily where you need a one size fits all. But I will give an example, perhaps. We are talking about bailouts to the airline industry. And we know that that is an extremely carbon-intensive industry. And so if we are considering doing that, there are two things that I think that we need to keep in mind. And this gives you an example, Alex, of what I would be talking about in terms of consequences. We should be using the leverage that we have if we are providing a bailout to first make sure that the bailout is focused on the workers and protecting the workers in that sector, as opposed to the executives. And then secondly, that we are insisting that they attach targets, emissions reductions targets to their own industry, and that those targets are set out along a timeline, and that if they fail to meet those targets, that there are penalties for failing to meet those targets. And there are many ways that we can set out those penalties, but there of course should be, because if you don't have an enforcement mechanism, if you don't have consequences, if you don't have a penalty, then it's really just a paper tiger, and we don't have any time for that. We've seen the extent of the willingness of the market to self-regulate itself and to move towards making the changes they need to make to get us to net zero. It's really the time for the government, if we are going to have accountability legislation, that people are accountable and there are consequences if they don't meet the targets that they commit to or that we set for them. When I say people, I mean the sectors, rather.
Do you have a follow-up, Alex?
Yeah, so just to clarify, so what you're looking for in this legislation then is sector by sector emissions reduction plans, and then there'd be consequences for companies and firms in those sectors if they don't reach them.
That's right. That's right. We have a lot of missing pieces, as you heard from our list, and these are just the foundational elements of a true climate accountability plan. There are others, but these are the essentials that we would need to see to have any confidence in this plan, and certainly. You need to look at each, and this is where a budget comes in place. You need to look at the entirety of our economy. You need to look at all the sectors within the economy, and you need to say, this is how much we have. This is our carbon budget. This is how much carbon we can expend between now, now and 2030, now and next year and the following, et cetera, and then divide it up. And then have a mechanism for keeping sectors and companies accountable, and also having consequences if they fail to respect that budget. It's, without those things, again, it's all just smoke and mirrors, and we have to move away from the platitudes. Platitudes are not a plan. If we are going to truly seize this moment to accelerate our transition to a net zero economy and use it as a way of helping to repair the damage from the pandemic, then we need a plan and a government that is going to demonstrate the leadership that will get us there. That is really what we are talking about now. There's no time left for anything else. And so if this government is unable to do that, and if we see that in this legislation that they're unable or unwilling to do that, then the Green Party is ready and willing to do that. And we are willing to work with the other parties as well. I want to really stress that when it comes to the pandemic and when it comes to the climate emergency, the Green Party will always seek to work in a cross-partisan way. These are not partisan issues. These are crises that we need to face together. We will rise or fall together.
Annamie, can I jump in for just 10 seconds? Just to quickly say, when we look, everything Annamie Paul has said this morning is also clear that we're talking about political accountability. We can't have, as she says, platitudes and no plans. So the Climate Accountability Acts that we've seen come out of other countries do give us some models from New Zealand, from Denmark, and there's a political accountability in having binding legislation that says, by 2025, we hit this target. By 2030, we hit this target. By 2035, if you find one common denominator in all the targets that previous Canadian governments have accepted, it's exactly caught up in what Annamie was saying about who's going to be in power in 2050 to be held accountable. Where our first target in 1990 was to be arrived at by the year 2000. None of the people who made that promise in 1990 were in power in 2000. And it's been consistently that. The target from Copenhagen from 2009 fell due this year. None of the people who negotiated. So the consistency is if the target is into another political generation, then there's no political accountability. That's why a Climate Accountability Act, as promised in the Liberal platform, as promised in the speech from the throne from last year, is in increments that fall due during the political lifetime of the politicians who make those promises.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah.
Any more questions in the room? Yep. Any more questions on the telephone? Sur le téléphone?
There are no further questions.
Okay. So thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Merci.
Merci Annamie, c'est bon de vous voir.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Elizabeth.